Hello, and welcome to Sunny Days Podcast, the podcast for folks to start living their grooviest, most magical lives. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, speaker, and coach. I use my degree in biochemistry, experience as a mental health provider, and spiritual gifts to align your subconscious programming with your conscious desires, guiding you into your dream reality. Here, you will receive practical guidance, insight, and stories that you can apply to create your happiest, most fulfilling life today. If you're ready to feel lit up, capable, and inspired, I invite you to join me on this sunny day. Today's episode of the Sunny Days podcast is all about quitting. This beautiful, magical, powerful, wise energy that is quitting. So quitting usually gets a pretty bad rap, but when I was thinking about how to air this first episode of my podcast and really telling the story of how I got here, I realized that this story is not really a story of starting, and it's more a story of quitting, what I quit to get here and how I continually tapped into the power of quitting in order to create better and better and better for myself. So let's get into quitting. So the first thing that I would consider as a big quit that got me to where I am today is leaving the place that I grew up. And not in a typical sense of, oh, I just left and went off to college, more like transitioning. It really felt like a quitting. And this is because growing up, I found myself in an abusive environment. And for years and years, I tried to save it. I tried to fix the situation. I tried to stay. I hoped that maybe if I did differently or did better or was better, that I could improve the situation, that I could make it a better place, that I could make it not toxic or harmful. I put that work and that effort and that responsibility on myself. And a lot of the times when it comes with quitting, it does come down to a feeling of obligation or responsibility that makes the act of leaving or transitioning feel like a quit. So the details of that are for another time. But long story short, I did end up leaving. And to me, I quit. I chose myself. So something that I go deeper into in, for example, my Freebird program is how to free ourselves from people and our attachments to them and our attachments to situations and feeling of obligation or responsibility, and how to be able to quit, to free ourselves, to open ourselves up to better and to soar higher. But for this scenario and the story that I'm telling now, I know that it may not seem like quitting. It may seem like I left something that was toxic to go on to something better. But a lot of times, this is what quitting looks like zoomed in, because zoomed in, I was scared and I didn't necessarily want to do it. And there was a lot holding me back and a lot keeping me there, and a lot that I just felt really tied to or obligated to try to work out or fix. So at the time, it didn't feel so much as an act of bravery or putting myself first, or doing what's best or what's needed. And it really felt like a quitting leading up to it. It felt like a quitting of the situation. But ultimately, it's leaving an old way of life behind in hopes for better. And regardless of what the quitting looks like, whether it's something that would be maybe praised, or admired, like leaving an abusive environment, or it's something like quitting a job or quitting a marriage, ultimately, quitting is leaving an old way of life behind in hopes for better. Whether or not that hopes for better is the primary motivation, or it's what's inspiring you to do so, or you feel like you're choosing yourself, even if it feels like you're letting people down or you're letting yourself down, that's ultimately what the energy of quitting is. And again, at the time, it may feel more like overwhelm and chaos and struggle to face that unknown. It may feel more like that than excitement or knowing it's going to be better or putting yourself first. So the next thing I quit was my 4-year relationship. And again, that is more of a experience for another time as far as that dynamic and what led to me quitting. But I in that time of quitting my relationship, it honestly felt like a quitting of a habit of something that was very codependent. And again, in the moment, it felt like I was letting myself down, like I was letting this person down, I was letting the situation down. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel freeing or something that would be praised or admired. It felt like a fail. And I feel like a lot of times with quitting, a big reason we are scared to quit or hold ourselves back from quitting, or even have a hard time after quitting, is a feeling of failure. But now that I'm bringing this up, it really reminds me of the positive qualities of quitting that we tend to admire. So, for example, if someone says that they quit smoking, or they quit an addictive substance that they, were using habitually that was harming them in their lives, everyone's like, "That's great, more power to you. You succeeded. You're capable." But then in a lot of instances, we use the term quitting in circumstances that insinuate that we are not capable, that we are weak, or that we failed. So it's very interesting as far as context and perception goes, that it is really based on the scenario, whether we look at quitting as something to praise and think of the person as so admirable and strong, or if we're going to judge that person as being weak or failed or they weren't capable and that's why they quit. Or most of the time, that judgment is really internalized towards ourself, regardless if we're getting that from the outside. But I do want to share that quitting is so powerful and so strong. And a lot of the times that you may be seeing yourself as weak or incapable, or you may be feeling that judgment from others, quitting is very brave and very powerful. And it is very much that energy of you are leaving the old, in hopes for better. It is putting yourself first. It is putting the potential of your life and what it can be and how it can be so much better than what it is now, that investment in that potential. And that is a huge, powerful, amazing step to take, regardless of the situation and regardless of the context of whether or not we're going to, as a society, praise this quit or look down on this quit. I think that that is a fallacy. And I think that that is just, uh, societal norms and perceptions, but in reality, quitting is most all of the time something really incredible that you can do for yourself. So, as far as quitting the relationship, leading up to it, again, it felt like that obligation, that responsibility, that attachment, that tie to it. And leading up to it, I felt like a failure. It didn't feel good to quit, to think about quitting. And it was so painful to think about doing that and going through with that, that it stopped me a lot of times and it kept me in it, even when the potential that was out there for my life was so much better than what I was living. At least what I was living was familiar, or it had this really big hold on me. And the feeling of failing or letting people down and disappointing people really outweighed, the decision to quit. But the thing is, once I finally got to the place where I did, I felt a breath of fresh air. I felt relief. I thought it was going to be a lot of pain and heartbreak and grief, and it wasn't. And it's okay if it would have been, but I think it spoke volumes to once I took the action and did it, now it felt like the empowering quit. Now it felt like I succeeded. Now it felt like I put myself first. So I'd like to share that just to keep in mind. I feel like that is something that we all tend to face, is that leading up to it and how difficult it is leading up to it, and all that we're inundated with, both internally and externally, about these judgments of ourselves, and the fear and the overwhelm and the guilt, and all of these things are so big and they feel so awful that it makes us feel like quitting is awful. But then once we go to do it, it can feel like such a release and so empowering, and like, oh my God, I put myself first, and oh my gosh, life can get so much better. And that's how it felt once I took that action. And I felt that in a lot of the times that I did quit things, not in every single one of them, but a lot of the times that energy does shift once you step in to that power. And it's honestly can feel, looking back, like it's actually more harmful or detrimental, or challenging to not step into the power. And the wanting to quit, having that desire, not stepping into it, that I feel causes the pain, more than the quitting itself. It's the fact that this power is there for you and you want it. And deep down, you know it's what's great for you and it's what's next. And you're not doing that. And that can cause a lot of pain. So the next thing that I quit, was like I mentioned in the intro, my degree is in biochemistry and molecular biology, and I actually worked in a Nobel Prize winning biochemistry lab. My boss was a Nobel Prize winner, and it was a very prestigious, position and place to be working, and it was such an honor. But when I was working there, it was absolutely awful. And again, like I can go into these different, zoom in more on these different circumstances in my life and what I got from them. But it was so awful working in the lab. It was not the mentality for me. I am such a free spirit. And as much as I am intelligent and work very hard, and I loved what I was doing, and I understood it all, and it was a great field for me, and what I had learned and was able to practice in the lab as far as the morale goes and the mentality of the lab and what's expected of you, and the rigidity, and oh my gosh, it was just so intense and, to me, inhumane. Um, it was a lot, and I just couldn't do it anymore. It was so awful. It was like breaking my spirit. It was breaking me down. And I ended up quitting, and when I was going to tell everyone in the lab that I was quitting, these are all people who had their PhDs, who really have worked their way up into this, and like this is what they do, and they do amazing work. So for me to go and tell them that I was quitting, I felt like such a failure. I felt like it meant that I was incapable and that all these people were capable. And I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle being there. I couldn't handle the work. It was just, all flaws, on my end, not being enough to be able to stay and continue on. But when I did quit, when I told my coworkers and my supervisors that I was quitting, they were amazed. They were inspired. They said they admired me. And again, I'm younger than them. I had my bachelor's, and they had like their doctorate. They were way above me, in that way, and they admired me. And some of them were saying that they wish that they had made the decision that I was making years ago. Some of them confided in me that they had regretted devoting their life to this and even getting their PhD and like going down this path, and, suffering in this kind of environment and field. And they looked up to me for doing this and they were so proud of me. And again, I expected that I was incapable, and that's why I was quitting. It meant that I was incapable and that they were capable, but instead they saw me as capable enough to quit, to leave. So that was a very pivotal experience and really taught me a lot about quitting. And hopefully you can see that in yourself if there's things that you're thinking about quitting that aren't good for you, or that you just feel like there's better, or just intuitively you feel like, you should leave, that that's what's best. think about the admiration of yourself to take that leap, and that far outweighs any bit of thinking that you didn't do enough or that you must have failed. None of that compares to the bravery and the admirable courage and power that it takes to quit something that you've been invested in. So my next thing that I quit was my dream job, which sounds so weird, that I quit, like, who would quit their dream job? So after working in the lab, I went to work in mental health, and I worked in a nonprofit, giving mental health to the community, being able to work with people and children and families and schools in a mental health setting, and it was incredible, and I loved everything about the job. It was my dream job. It was amazing to work with people in this way, and I just felt like I got to really flourish and become my best self, and it was in such contrast to the lab where the work mentality was just so amazing, and, working in mental health, they were just very accommodating and very, like, in tune, and a lot of people that I worked with were spiritual, which, you'll hear later if you stick around how I am a, spiritual practitioner in many ways, so it's really cool to connect with people like that, and just everything about the job was wonderful. And then a couple years into it, I would just really dread going to work. And it was so odd because nothing about the job really changed. I just dreaded going to work. And I was like, that's really weird. Maybe I'm just getting burnout or something like that. But as I continued on, even if I would take days off, here and there, and like I would, like I said, I'm such a free spirit. So I make things very freeing, even if they're not. Like I just find a way to make myself feel free, whether it's like climbing a tree on my lunch break or whatever it is. So I would do all that. And I just still felt this dread, but it was my dream job and I loved it and I had no reason to leave. I had no reason on paper to leave besides this feeling. So I continued on. As I continued on, that dread turned into anxiety and that anxiety turned into depression. And eventually the depression turned into much worse. And I was not okay at all. And I ended up quitting, and once I quit, I immediately felt so much better. I immediately felt relief and it felt right. And it didn't feel right to apply to other jobs. It only felt right to start my own business. And that's a big, that's a big way of how I got to where I am today. Obviously, I have my business full time. And that was the leap that it took, but quitting was so interesting because there was still no reason to quit, and that's why I held on for so long, is because I had no reason to complain. I had no reason to to feel dread or to be unhappy or to be depressed. There was no reason, and there was all the reasons to stay, and it had been my dream job, and it had made me so happy. So with this about quitting, I do wanna say that it's perfectly fine and natural and normal to have something that once brought you a lot of happiness be the thing that ends up causing you discomfort or dread or pain. And it may be time to quit and move on to the next thing or to allow the next thing to unfold, give it space to come in. It probably won't come in while you're still, in the tide to whatever's taking up all your space, whether it be a job or a person or whatever it is. But it's okay to quit things that once made you super happy, and it doesn't invalidate that you believed in them at the time and that you loved them and that you loved that time with them and that it did make you happy. It doesn't invalidate or discredit any of that. It's okay to have felt like that was your dream job and it was at the time and then leave. It's okay to felt like that was your dream person, or, a marriage, and then that thing that once made you happy doesn't make you happy anymore and it's time to leave. And I do believe that that feeling of that dread that it no longer makes me happy, as it carries on, and of course, everyone is different in different contexts. So, there may be things for you to try to work on, to work through it. If it's a relationship, to work together through it. Of course, I'm not just saying, drop of a hat, leave. But I'm saying if that continues to go on and it's like no matter what you do, staying only makes you feel worse. And you feel like you're feeling that way because of the act of staying, like you staying makes yourself hurt more and more and more. It's really this push to leave. It's this push that you've outgrown it. It hurts. It hurts to have outgrown something and it's becoming tighter and tighter and tighter on you. It's time to take that off and allow the next thing to come through. So I really do believe in that pattern. And in that scenario, working in mental health, it took me a long time and it took me really being knocked down and like put in a corner, like as far as my emotional mental health way to quit. It just felt like my back was against the wall and there's nothing else I could do. But since that experience, I've gotten so much better at knowing when that feeling comes up with whatever it is. It doesn't have to just be a job, with anything, with any phase, with anything in my life. Knowing that feeling and being able to address it and quit quicker. Quit, like I said, not necessarily at like a drop of a hat, but quit knowing that like, "Oh, it's time. It's time now. That means it's time." Instead of forcing myself to stay and being confused and overwhelmed and feeling guilty and all those things that come with it that just drag you along and make you feel worse and worse and worse until you finally get the message and quit. I'm way better at like having that come up, and like working with it and being like, okay, and trusting it and being like, it's time to leave. The next thing is here. The next thing is here. You do not have to know what that next thing is. A lot of the times you probably won't know what the next thing is until you quit, until you do that leap. You may not have that assurance. But it is like this message, this guide that's like, hey, the next thing is here. So the last thing that I want to talk about quitting as far as getting to where I am today is I quit my roles. So of course I quit that job in mental health and started my own business and I'm in my own business now. So that is a lot of like that final piece that got me here. But even so, I had to quit my roles to really be able to flourish here and continue on and to continue to grow this and live more and more my dream reality, is these roles of my programming and what I've taken on, who I thought that I was or needed to be, reactions that just come automatically, like quitting these roles of lack and not having enough money or playing small in my business or quitting the roles of being the victim, just quitting all of these roles and letting them go in order to step into the new role. There's new roles out there. There's roles that better suit you for where you are now. And it may seem easy to quit those roles, especially with things that we don't want. It's like, I don't want to be in this role where, I block myself up from receiving money or financial compensation. But these roles have such a strong hold on us. And there is, again, a lot of grief and a lot of feeling of guilt or quitting. There's a lot of ties to these roles, just like there's ties to outside people and outside situations. There's these attachments that it's not so easy just because we see that it may be good for us or that it can open doors for us. It doesn't mean that that's enough motivation to just drop them. It is it is a process to be able to truly let those roles go, to truly quit them, just like it's a process quitting any other thing. But that is a big part of how I got to where I am today, not just on paper, like, oh, I run my own business now, but really being able to experience it more fully and expand it and enjoy it and have it be way more magical and just to thrive in it was really the quitting of the roles. It's not just like oh, you have a business now, in the state of California, here is your business. And now you're living that life that you want in the business. For me, it was really the roles that got me to that part of it. So yeah, quitting is how I got here to where I am, and I know that quitting is going to be a big part of my future. I still use it all the time. Like I said, it's such a powerful tool and skill to be able to discern when those feelings are coming up, that, hey, there's something better out there. It's time to leave this phase. It's such a powerful thing to be able to know that and trust that rather than do the typical response, which is just hold on tighter or feel guilty or just drag yourself through the mud with it, holding on to it and not wanting to let go, and then causing more and more harm to yourself by doing so. When the only reason it's coming up is to help you and to get you to this wonderful new thing. It's trying to get you there. It is your compass. So quitting is definitely, I believe, one of the most underrated, misunderstood, yet powerful things that you can do. So before I leave you with some takeaways, I do want to share with you my offering around setting yourself free. I just feel like it aligns so much with what I've been talking about today. My Freebird program is the program for you if you hope for more, but continue to find yourself in the same or similar place in these cycles, in these patterns, these experiences that just keep you not where you're wanting to be, not in your dream reality, not where you consciously desire for yourself. You have the power to get to where you want to be, to live your fullest potential and experience your most fulfilled life. And in the Freebird program, we dive into unblocking this power and using it to create the life you desire. So, just like with quitting, there are all these ties that we have. And again, these ties can be external, but they can also be internal, like our roles and our programming. So in the Freebird program, we do go through both. We go through freeing ourselves internally and externally, and in a way where you have lifetime access to it and you can always come back and continue to use it, continue to apply it to your life so that you can quit quicker. And when I mean quicker, I really just mean with more ease and more effectively, and to where it's not this thing that is such a big decision or drags you down and overwhelms and confuses you. It's very much like you're doing this thing makes you happy, you love it, it's great. And then eventually, those feelings start to come up. It's not making you happy anymore. And you have the ability to be like, okay, I honor this thing. This was great. I loved it. I'm ready. Let's go. Let's go to the next thing. And you do, and it's amazing. Now, this is the best thing you've experienced. This is where you want to be. This is what feels right. And you just continue on leapfrogging like that to better and better and better and better and better. And just continually living in the place that feels right in all aspects, in your job, in your relationships, in your lifestyle. It feels right, rather than being in places that just feel wrong, that feel off, but you don't know where to go, you don't know how to leave, you don't know what's on the other side. So yeah, that is Freebird. It includes over 10 hours of coaching calls, plus plenty of Reiki hypnosis sessions for deeper subconscious shifts and healing. If you don't know, I am a Reiki master, so I do love to include Reiki and hypnosis along with the coaching work that we do as well, just to get everything sinking in and shifting and get that insight on all levels. Okay, so to celebrate the launch of Sunny Days podcast, this is episode 1. You get 30% off my Freebird program just for being a listener. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in and checking this out. So you can use the code SunnyDayser in all caps at checkout in the Freebird program. The code will be in the show notes, same with the link for my free bird program to learn more about it. So yeah, definitely check that out because I appreciate you for listening. And if this resonated with you, I definitely would love to have you in the free bird program. Okay, so my takeaways for today. Okay, so we talked about quitting, some core takeaways I definitely want to leave you with as far as quitting goes is yes, something that once made you very happy, if it's not making you happy anymore, that does not take away from the happiness that it once gave you or any of that wonderful experience that you had does not take away from that. But it could definitely mean that it's time for you to go on into something better. And then quitting. So when you are feeling so guilty about quitting something, you feel so guilty, you feel so obligated, you feel so attached, you feel so scared, remember that all those feelings are coming up as you aren't stepping into the power of quitting. Those are not reflective of your experience when you quit. All those feelings make it seem like, oh, quitting is bringing about all these awful feelings and experiences. But it's not quitting that's doing that. It's the fact that you're holding yourself back from quitting and the anticipation of quitting that's causing all those things to arise. But the act of quitting is a very powerful, brave, admirable act. And it's something that is putting yourself first. It's something that's saying, hey, the potential that I see for myself in my life and that I want to be able to have, I want more and better for myself, that way outweighs the comfort and familiarity and obligations of this scenario that I'm in right now. Awesome. So I hope that you enjoyed episode 1 of Sunny Days. Definitely stick around for more. I can't wait to see you in the Freebird program as well. Again, your discount code and link is in the show notes. So yeah, thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.